J.W. Atkinson was young, but he got started with Mr. John Neal at the Thriftway grocery. Before that, I'm not sure now, but I think I can remember that there was a tractor company there in that building or in that location. There was some type of tractor dealership back then. But anyway, Mr. Neal started the business and J.W. worked for him. And then he worked on up and bought the business from Mr. Neal. And Miss Neal was one of my favorite people. She was my 8th grade English teacher. And she told us to learn the helping verbs, am, is, are, was, and those things. Well, John didn't learn them. She whispered to me at the end of class, before I left, if you don't know those by tomorrow, Clyde Kennedy will wear you out. So guess what? I decided to learn the helping verbs. In later years, when I taught with Miss Neal at Walton High School, I'd do her set decorations for her play, my art classes. And one day she said, "Oh, John, can we do this or that up high or something?" And I said, "Sure, Miss Neal, this is not helping verbs. I have this." And she didn't remember, but she was very close to J.W. And one time J.W. became the president of the Kiwanis Club. And J.W. said, knowing I'm a country fella, said, I decided to look me up some big words to use because Miss Neal was coming to listen to my speech at the Kiwanis Club. And he said he looked him up some words. He got up there and fumbled around over his speech. And when he going home, his wife said, "Don't ever do that again." Said, "You embarrassed me and Miss Neal." But J.W., when I first got into the family, so to speak, see, J.W.'s family is kin to my wife's family. And he was always very quiet. And I didn't know he could tell these stories that, and just have you rolling. And so one of the stories that's the highlight of the J.W. Atkinson slab of stories was he and his wife had visited almost every state on their camper. They'd take the grandkids camping or they'd go camping. And I think they'd been to every state but, let's see, it was Maine or Hawaii. So he said, "Where do you want to go?" And I think she said, "Well, we'll have to go to Maine because we can't drive to Hawaii." So they start to Maine. Now, when you're watching the news on TV and you see the main area of downtown New York City, and you see all those taxis and all that stuff going on in front of Radio City Music Hall or whatever it is, just remember this. J.W. took the wrong turn coming into New York off 95, ended up in the middle of New York City. And he said the police must have figured it out pretty quick that he was lost. And the policeman stopped him right downtown and said, "Where are you going?" And he said, "I'm going to Maine if I could find the way out of here." They said, "Well, look, we'll help. Go down to this next crossover and do a U-turn and we'll be in front of you and we'll escort you to the chute to go, the ramp to go to Maine." Well, they made the loop, headed toward Maine. J.W.'s wife said, "I hear something bumping." It was the cap off the sewer of his motor home. And when he made the U-turn, he must have hit the curb and knocked it off, so he emptied his sewer tank in the middle of New York City. But J.W. was one of a kind. He was very, very talented and a very wonderful fellow. And he asked me to do him one favor one time. He asked me to do a portrait of Earl Hutto. And I did that. I did a portrait in pencil of Earl Hutto standing in front of the Capitol for J.W. to give to him. And the last time I saw Mr. Hutto, we were talking about that. And with JW, he ran the Thriftway for all those years, and Shirley's still running it from 6 to 8, 6 days a week. He did a lot for the community. Any kind of community function he was in on,
Right.
but he'd act like he didn't want to be lead out in it.
Right.
But he'd support anything, that had to do with the Funiac Springs. I was your typical kid in school. I had asthma very bad when I was growing up. And thanks to Dr. Myers, our local doctor, he helped me a lot with that. And if I had asthma after a ball game or a track meet, I could go to his house, he'd give me an asthma shot, that kind of thing. And we became kind of close, and because he saved my life in the 7th grade. My teacher of the 5th period noticed that I was really sick, and I thought I had some type of flu, or back then you didn't tell them you were sick unless you were about to go under.
Yeah.
And Miss Couch, Zaba Couch's wife, she said, "You're sick, go to the office and tell them to take you to the lakeside." And I said, "Well, I'll miss the bus." And she said, "Well, that doesn't matter, somebody will take you home." And so I get there, Dr. Myers puts me on the table, makes about 2 punches. He said, "This appendix got to come out right now," and said, "We'll let Johnny and Eunice sign papers when they get here, but we're not waiting on them." And by the time Mother and Daddy got there, I was waking up. Doctors won't do that now.
No.
And later, when I helped Dr. Myers put up fence down at Red Bay, we'd talk about that, "Doc, thanks for saving my life." But they had the technology back then. The Lakeside Hospital called the local Funiac Tower at Argyle the Forestry Tower. And they 10 forward down to Red Bay Forestry Tower. And the lady crawled down the ladder, got in her car, and went up to my dad's house to tell him I was in the hospital. That's how technology is different. But anyway, that's at Walton High School. I started in the 7th grade, and Coach Joyner, that later became my coach, he helped me so much, and because he encouraged me to run in the field day, because I for a country boy, I was kind of a fast runner back then. Now I'm not so fast. But anyway, he said, "I'll take you home from the meet." And I just had him for PE, back then. And so I started doing the track because of that. And then later, I graduated from Walton High School, 64, and didn't know what I wanted to do. Thought I'd go in the service. But in the meantime, they were taking people. The Vietnam period was going on. And so I thought either I'll go to service, get a job. I thought not much about college. I didn't, And so we had a track meet when I was in the 9th grade, and it was at Paxton. And I'd never seen a hurdle. And then somebody asked me, you going to get in the hurdle race? And so I told Coach Falk, I said, "I want to try that hurdles." Well, I'd never done it before. And about halfway around that packed clay track, I hung my foot, running full speed, and hit on the left shoulder, and it crushed that humerus bone. And by the time they got me to the lakeside, the bones were sticking out, and they had to bandage it. They took me to the lakeside. The doctor, he was as fires this time, I think. He said, "We'll send you to Pensacola." Dr. Batson, Pensacola, put me back together, and that pretty well kept me out of the military. They told me to go to college, As luck would have it, OW was just opening. And I was a charter graduate of OW, the first class, and became a great friend of Dr. McCracken. And he helped me in art, in my art stuff. So when I was working on my master's later at LSU, I carved a bunch of statues and things. And Dr. McCracken sent them to New Jersey to be in a show of, it was 10 artists with 10 works. Well, all of them sold, but one. And Elmer Williams and Carol bought it. So, but anyway, so I went through Okaloosa Walton, then I went on to Troy. And we came back after the teacher walkout. We couldn't help anything about the teacher walkout, but I was sad about it because some of the people that were my teachers left. And we were scheduled, my wife and I, to go to Rossville, Georgia. We'd been offered jobs. And my dad said, you can have a job back here. And he was, I guess, prejudiced because, in this sense, because I'm an only child and he wanted me back here with them. So we ended up, I took Mr. Hessler's place finally, and he gave me a lot of materials to work with. And he even came back after, 20 years to Walton High School, and Terry Miller was principal, and he said, somebody's up here to see you. And it was Mr. Hessler. And after his wife had died, he'd gone on a trip around the world on a merchant ship, and he brought me some objects from Egypt. He knew I loved the Egyptian stuff. And so when I started teaching at Walton, I got to know those people that taught me as people, not just teachers. And Clyde Kennedy, one of my favorite stories, he became a great friend. I was a young teacher, and he said, let's go floundering to the Bay Field. And we went, and it was all, troubled water, messy waves. You couldn't see anything. He said, let's go back to Chapman's restaurant and eat a seafood dinner. Well, I thought, maybe I have $2. I said, Mr. Kennedy, I don't know if I got enough money. I'll cover you till, tomorrow. We get in his truck and start back across the Bay Field pulling that old boat, and he said, get that pistol out of the glove compartment. I said, what? He said, get the pistol out of the glove compartment, throw the shells out so you won't shoot a hole in my dash. Well, I did. And then he said, take a pencil and poke that $50 bill out of the barrel. He had rolled up a $50 bill like a cigarette and poked it down the barrel of that old 38 to hide it. But a lot of these stories about these different teachers, and they're all fun. Mr. Murray always loved to dance with Melissa Beasley. Melissa was a great friend. We'd have a school dance. And most of us, were bored being, I got to go be a chaperone at the dance. Well, Mr. Murray would want Melissa, and they'd dance. Well, the kids would most of the dancing by that time, the kids just kind of do their own thing. Well, back in their day, you had dances that had names. Well, the kids would just be baffled. They'd just stand back and quit dancing and watch Melissa and Mr. Murray. And Mr. Murray in class, he was totally serious, but around us, he was a hoot. I told this story at one of the class reunions, and Wanda Wyndham was there, and she said, Mr. Murray talked very quickly, and she said, tell him what Mr. Murray called when he called the roll. And I said, what did he call you? She said, Wanda Wyndham. In one word, I said, well, Mr. Murray, we'd say, Mr. Marvin, what do you want for a snack? And he'd say, Butterfinger. A lot of people don't know also that the Anderson sisters, Ruth and Lucille, gave mega bucks to Okaloosa Walton for scholarships. I said, why don't y'all get a lawyer and put that under the OW Foundation? And they distribute it out so the same kid won't get all the scholarships or whatever. She said, well, I want some C students to get the scholarships every once in a while because they run the world. And I have Miss Ruth's. A lot of people don't know she was a major in the wax. And I have her New Testament that was given to the troops, signed by Harry Truman.